I think it's fair to say the data you have seen so far is, well, kind of plain looking. And that is fine in some cases. Sometimes, though, we may want to change the look of data a little. We may want to merge data across multiple cells, or change the way data is aligned, or make the text take multiple lines in a cell. Or we may just want to make dollar amounts look like dollar amounts. Or we may want to change the color of the text, or colors of some cells. We're going to do all of that and more coming up as we learn some ways to format data. The first concept we're going to look at under formatting cells and ranges is that of merging cells. For this example, I've opened up a weekly sales file with a weekly sales heading, but this heading is not centered across the trucks and the days of the week. And maybe that's something we want to do here. Now, when you go to merge cells, the advantages are that the data will look a little bit more lined up. The disadvantage is it makes it a little bit tougher at times to fix column widths. So you do have to weigh those options when you're thinking about merging cells. Now, as far as merging cells goes, the first thing you want to do is select the cells you want to merge. So for example, if I'm trying to merge this weekly sales heading across these 6 columns, I actually want to select these 6 cells. Now, the mistake you want to avoid is selecting the entire row. Remember, there's 16,000 plus columns in Excel, so if you select an entire row and merge this, you're merging 16,000 cells. Probably not your intent. So again, we want to make sure we only select the cells we are trying to merge together. Now, with these cells selected, let's look at some merging options. You'll find this in the alignment group on the Home tab. There's a Merge button right here. The default merge is Merge and Center, so we'll click on it, and just as advertised, it took our heading and merged it and centered the heading across these 6 cells. Nice. Now I'm going to click Undo here just because we want to show you some different options. These options come from the drop-down arrow on the Merge and Center button. So let's see what happens if we click Merge Across. See the difference? We still have 6 merged cells, it's just that the alignment didn't change. The text is still sitting on the left-hand side of the merged cell block. So this is just a matter of preference. Some people like to have the information centered, others don't. Now what if we change our mind here? Well, if we click the drop-down arrow and click Merge and Center, notice nothing happens. In fact, it undid the merge. So the tricky part is knowing that you can only have one merge on at a time, and if you do change your mind, you need to unmerge first. So now that we have these 6 cells unmerged, if I want to do a Merge and Center, no problem. I've clicked the drop-down arrow, I'll choose Merge and Center, and there we go. If you decide at some point you want to unmerge cells, you can click the drop-down arrow, same location, and you can click Unmerge Cells. This probably looked better merged, so let me put this back. There we go. So those are some common ways to merge cells. Here's another way you can merge cells. Over here, maybe I want to take this cell and make it stretch over 2 lines, 2 rows. So what I'm going to do is select these 2 cells. Now notice this is more of a vertical merge. And to do this, once you have the range selected, in fact, just to emphasize this, let me select 3 rows here. And I'll click the drop-down arrow on Merge, and I'll click Merge Cells. Now notice this is more of a vertical merge. And I still have to stretch the column width in order to get this to fit. But you'll see that this now takes up 3 rows worth of cells instead of the first example we had, which was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. So there are some different ways you can merge. You can merge horizontally as we did here. You can merge vertically as we did here. Just keep in mind this does affect your ability to resize things later. Now, in addition to merging cells, you can also modify the cell alignment and indentation. One thing to understand about the way data enters itself into Excel. By default, your text is going to be left aligned, as we see here with the truck and the days of the week and the word totals. And by default, your numbers are going to be right aligned, as we see with the numbers I've highlighted here. Now, a lot of the time, that works just fine for whoever's working with Excel, but sometimes you do want to make some alignment changes. For example, these trucks, although they're numbers, they're not really numbers, they're more like text. So maybe I want to left align these. So what I'm going to do is select these different trucks, and in the alignment group on the Home tab, here's some alignment buttons we can use. In this case, I'm going to do a little left align. So now these line up more with the truck heading up above. With merge cells vertically, you might decide you want to not have the text at the bottom of the cell. So for example, if I click this cell over here, H1, and I want to change the vertical alignment, this can be done. Same alignment group. We have some alignment buttons here. So it's up to you to decide which one you like the best. I kind of like middle myself, but you can make your best choice when you're working on your own Excel files. Along with alignment, you can also control the indentation of cells. Now, you're not going to find yourself indenting information as much in Excel as you would, say, in Word, probably. But we still need to know how to do this for the exam and for real-life purposes. So I'm going to click the word totals here. And in this alignment group, I'm going to go ahead and indent this. And you'll see every time you click on it, it increases the indent. If you click on the decrease indent, that's exactly what happens here. So it's just a matter of controlling how you want the text to look in a cell. Speaking of looks, here's one more alignment some people like to use. Some people think this looks cool, others do not. I'll let you be the judge. When it comes to alignment, we can also tilt text. For example, I'm going to select these 5 days of the week. And in this alignment group, there's an alignment orientation button here that I'm going to click the drop-down arrow of, and I'm going to change these different angles. For example, counterclockwise. Again, some people really like this look, others do not, but that's up to you to decide. There are some different ways that you can make this work. A real-life tip I have for you is this. Sometimes I've had to turn column headings sideways just to get things to fit on one page. Now, truth is, I don't really like this look here, so I'm going to go back to a counterclockwise look. Now, what if you want to customize this look a little bit? You can use the dialog box launcher on the alignment group here, this arrow, and you can click on it. And then from here, you can actually control the exact angle of the text. So I've moved this from 45 down to 30 degrees. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And there you go. It's a subtle move. The days of the week here are still tilted, but not nearly as much. Those are just some of the alignment options that you have with your text. So we just did a little bit of formatting on these days of the week. We changed the alignment, tilted these up 30 degrees. Now, over time, as you format your Excel files, you might not remember the exact formatting you do on a cell or a range of cells, as we have in this case, and you might want to apply that formatting elsewhere. For example, we may want to take the same formatting that we have for these days of the week and format these truck numbers accordingly. After a while, I'm not going to remember if I tilted these 30 degrees or 45 degrees or whatever, and you probably won't either. The good news is you don't need to remember this, because what you can do is you can actually copy a format from one location to another using a tool called the Format Painter. For this example, I'm going to select one of these days of the week. And then on the Home tab on the ribbon, I'm going to click this little paintbrush. This is the Format Painter. And now, as soon as I paint on another cell, it will take the same format as I had in this previous cell. So this is like using a paintbrush to paint a wall a different color. Now, sometimes you need to paint just a little bit, in this case, just the one cell. But what if you want to paint multiple cells? Instead of single-clicking the paintbrush, the Format Painter, double-click it. Now, I've double-clicked the paintbrush. Again, I've already got this cell formatted, so that's why I double-click the paintbrush here. And then you can click, and you can keep clicking until you decide you don't want to format anymore. For example, I'm going to leave these totals right where they're at. But I've painted the format on these different trucks. And then once you're done painting, put the paintbrush back. To do this, just click on the paintbrush once again. So to recap, using the Format Painter, single-click paints one time. If you double-click the brush, you can paint to your heart's content until you don't want to paint anymore. And when you don't want to paint anymore, just click on the paintbrush once again. Just remember, the whole key to starting with the Format Painter is to start with the cell that's already been formatted. Another formatting option we want to take advantage of is that of wrapping text within cells. For this example, I've opened up another copy of the Daily Truck Sales Log file, and this is a classic case of a situation in which we might want to wrap text. Let me get rid of that message there. There we go. Now, why do I say that? Because we've got these different headings for these different businesses, and they're taking up a whole lot more room than the numbers that we have in these cells. So in a lot of cases, we may want to wrap these headings onto two lines within the same cell. Now, there are a couple of different ways you can do this, and we're going to show you both. The first thing you want to do if you want to wrap text is to select the cells you want to wrap. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and select these businesses here. But before we go any further, you got to think through this a little. Because what if you add some more businesses later on? They might have long names. You might want to wrap those on the 2 or 3 lines. The best practice here is to actually wrap text in the entire row. So I'm going to select row number 4 here. This way, if we add some businesses later on, we can wrap the text very easily. And then with this selected, this row, I'm going to look on the alignment area and I'm going to click Wrap Text. It's this option here. Now you'll notice with Wrap Text turned on, nothing has changed. But if we go through now and decide to resize some of these columns, and then adjust the row height, you'll notice that the text actually wraps over multiple lines inside that cell. So it takes a little bit of work, but it's doable. Same thing here. The text is now wrapping within the cell. Now, some people like the look of this a lot, others do not. This is a personal preference at this point, but this will actually save some width and give you a better chance to get things to fit on one page width-wise when you print this information. So while this isn't something you're going to do all the time, this does come in handy when you have longer headings. Went a little too far with this one. There we go. Now, what about entering text and wrapping it within a cell? For this example, I'm just going to go ahead and expand this column a little bit. I'm going to enter another business name here. To do this, I'm going to start typing the business name, and then here comes an important keyboard shortcut. Instead of pressing Enter, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and press Enter. Because what Alt-Enter does is it moves you to a new line, but here's the key. It keeps you in the same cell. This way you can wrap text over multiple lines within a cell. And then when I'm done entering information in this cell, I'll go ahead and press Enter. And there you go. You can turn on wrap text for cells anytime you want. Remember that if you are wrapping text within a cell as you're typing, use the Alt-Enter shortcut on the keyboard to get to that next line. Now we're going to apply some basic formatting to text we have in Excel worksheets, starting with applying formats to numbers. As you see, this file is a sales log. The only thing is, these don't look like sales numbers because they don't have any dollar amounts associated with them. They just look like numbers to me. So we're going to make these look like dollar amounts. Now, anytime you want to change the formatting of numbers, the first thing you want to do is select those numbers. So we'll click on the first number here, and I'm going to look for that last number. There it is. And I'm going to include the totals here. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select that last number. Remember, that's a keyboard shortcut you want to take advantage of when you're selecting a range of cells. Then, from the Home tab, let's look at the number group, because here we see a nice big dollar sign. And this is going to give us the accounting number format. Now I'm going to click here, and you'll see immediately we have dollar signs and decimals. These look like dollar amounts now, which is nice. Looks like there were no sales here, as indicated by the dash here. And if we go down to the totals, we see that a couple of columns are no longer wide enough, so we'll fix these column widths here. Again, it's a matter of selecting the column and double-clicking the right edge. There we go. Now, there are a couple of different dollar sign-like formats you can use for numbers. In fact, let me highlight the range once again. And in the accounting, I want you to pay attention to where the dollar sign is located, and then we're going to compare this to another choice. Because we have the accounting format on these numbers now, but if we click the drop-down arrow and choose currency, what's the difference? The difference is the placement of that dollar sign. Because in currency, the dollar sign goes right up against the number. If you're trying to save space width-wise on a sheet, that's probably the way you'll want to go. But most people I know who deal with financials like to have the dollar signs lined up. So for that reason, we'll click the drop-down arrow on the format and we'll choose accounting. Remember, accounting lines up the dollar signs, currency does not. Those are your two differences. Now we have one number over here that's not a dollar sign, it's a percentage, the satisfaction rate. So I'm going to click on this individual cell and click the percent symbol, 93%. Some people do like to have decimals on percentages. And so with this, or any other number for that matter, you can either increase or decrease the decimal accordingly. So if I click here a couple of times, I'll increase the decimal. If I click the decrease decimal, obviously I'm decreasing the number of decimals here. And then another thing you want to take into consideration is that although you have a lot of different formats through these choices, you may need to get a little bit fancier with the formats here. So for example, if I were to click more number formats, although this is a percentage and we control the decimal places here. If you need to change this back to general, you can. If you want to make this a number to where you can change the decimals, you can do so here. And this will also give you the flexibility of displaying negative numbers the way you want, although you're not going to have a negative percentage here, I don't think. But if these are other numbers, you can make your choice here on how to display negative numbers. Here you have your currency and accounting choices. And then if you're formatting dates and times, you have some of those choices as well. As a matter of fact, we'll look at that in just a moment. That said, I do want to put this back as a percentage choice with one decimal place, so I'll do so here. And then click OK. So there you go with a percentage. Now as far as dates go, I'm going to select all of these different dates here. And I'll click the drop-down arrow on the date. And you can go with a short date, you can go with a long date. But if you want to customize that date format just a little bit, again, you want to click more number formats. Because here you have more date choices. Now often, to save space, a lot of people will want 2-digit years on their dates. Some people like to have the leading 0 in front of the month, just in case you've got October through December and you want to line up those numbers. The point is, when you click more number formats, you actually have more number formats. And you can pick and choose which formats you want. So in this case, I'll go with this lineup and click OK, and these numbers have adjusted accordingly. Now, in addition to formatting numbers, you may also want to format the actual cells themselves. We're talking here the actual text. For this example, I'm going to select row number 1, and I'm going to make these headings look a little bit different. To do this, you'll usually use the font group on the Home tab, because here we can change the font if we want. This is a little different. We can change the size if we wish, because maybe you're trying to emphasize something here. You might want to change the color of the text, as we see here. And you might even want to change the background fill. Now, this is not something I would want to do with the entire row selected. So here's a little trick. If I want to do a format change on just individual cells, we've already discovered that if we click on a cell and then we hold down the Shift key and click on another cell, it's going to select the entire range. But if you just want to select individual cells, you can click on a cell, and then here's the keyboard shortcut. You can hold down the Control key and click on other cells and just individually select those. And then you can format those through, in this case, the fill color I'm going to change here. Got to find one that matches with that rust color. Oh, here we go. This ought to work. That looks decent. There you go. Again, I held down Control as I selected these different cells, and then I was able to make that formatting change. Now, sometimes you've got to get a little bit fancier with this. Not all the time in Excel, but every once in a while. But when you want to do that, I'm going to leave these 3 cells selected for this particular part of the exercise. You want to use the dialog box launcher. So in the font group, we want to click that little arrow to the right edge of it. And then from here, we have a whole lot of formatting choices we can make. So for example, instead of regular, maybe I'll go with italic here. And as you make these changes, always pay attention to the preview that you have, so you can see if this is something you want to keep or not. If we want to underline something, we can. Although when you underline things, people will often mistake those for hyperlinks, so underlining text is not as common as it used to be. You have some effects you can apply here. If you want to put borders around these different cells, you can do so. So for example, I've clicked the Border tab, and I'll select a border here to outline these cells. And maybe I'll want to change the border color to match up with the text that I've got, or close anyway. So then if we click OK, see now we've got borders around these different cells. This is not something you're going to do all the time, but for the MAS exam, you do want to know how to set up formatting using the dialog box launcher. So I would suggest getting a little practice with that. Now, if you're not in the mood to go through and individually format cells, you can apply cell styles. I'm going to apply a couple of cell styles on the February tab here. Same file, just a different tab. And what I'm going to do is select these numbers. And then we're going to look at styles on the Home tab. In fact, we've got cell styles right here. This is just a matter of choosing some pre-built formats. No more, no less. For example, if we want to go with the calculation option, it's a nice little orange here with a gray background, we can. If we want to go with something to tell people to check cells, we can. A lot of people like to use green for good and red for bad. Those are some options you've got. If you want to go with a particular color and an accent, you can do that as well. Plus, down here in our normal format, you've got some currency options if you wish to use those. A lot of people usually use the regular formatting for that rather than styles. You can use styles for those. More often than not, though, people will use styles just to get some pre-built formatting into these cells. So for example, I'm just going to use output here because it's nice as far as color schemes go. Nice little silver and black option. So we have a little different look on these different cells. Now you can make your own styles if you wish. Again, I'll click on the drop-down arrow on Cell Styles. I'll click New Cell Style. I'll give this a name. And I'll click Format. And maybe make just a subtle change here. For example, maybe on the font, instead of bold, I'll just go with regular. And maybe I'll make just a slight adjustment to the color. Maybe make it just a little bit darker. There we go. We'll click OK. If we click OK again, we now have that style that we can use anytime we want. It actually sits at the top of the styles. This is similar to themes here, except with themes, you're doing the entire workbook. With cell styles, you're just affecting the cells that you've selected. So if you want to do some quick formatting on cells, use Cell Styles. If you want to do some more custom formatting, use the font group, use the number group as needed on the Home tab on the ribbon. We did a lot of formatting just now. There is one goal to have when formatting data, and this is a real-life, on-the-job goal. Moderation is key. It's fine to change the look of data in Excel, but you never want to make so many changes that the focus on the data itself is lost. A few formatting changes here and there are really all you need.